Hello everyone, welcome back to Truth or Demons podcast. I'm your host, Stevie, and this is Annabelle Part 3.
One of the most famous would be Annabelle. This is a Raggedy Ann doll that's made like thousands of other dolls, except that this doll was used in communication, almost like having a seance.
1975, the Hartford Sunday Herald.
East Hartford, quote, I picked up the Raggedy Ann doll, shook her hard, and shouted, "You're nothing but a toy." I felt a sudden burning pain across my chest. When I opened my shirt, there were 7 bleeding claw marks slashed across my body. End quote.
So says Anthony Rossi of East Hartford. This is the opening for the article, and then it goes on to say, quote,
It's true. We saw it happen, says his girlfriend Marguerite Tata and her roommate Annalie Getz.
The three share an apartment on Glen Road in East Hartford. They related a most bizarre tale of the supernatural. Then it continues, quote,
It all started about a year after we moved in, says Marguerite. Tony and I were dating, and he came to live with us. I had a full-size Raggedy Ann doll my mother had given me a couple years ago, and I kept it on my bed as decoration. But then strange things started to happen. When we came from work, we'd find the doll in different places. In the kitchen, on the floor, and even kneeling in a chair. We all thought one of us was fooling around, so nothing was said about it. Then, one day, just before Christmas, I came home and I found a little chocolate booty on the stereo set. Both Tony and Annalie denied any knowledge of it. We couldn't understand how it got there. Then, that same week, we found some keys in an ashtray I had just cleaned and put on the coffee table. Again, none of us could explain their presence of to whom they belonged. Another night, when Marguerite came home from her job as a nurse.
Okay, so the image I have of the article is cut off here and blocked by another paper, but it continues up on the next column. Quote,
All went well for the next 2 weeks. The 3 people and Annabelle lived like a family. Marguerite would chat with the doll and sit her at the table. Annalie would cuddle her on her lap. Only Anthony remained slightly wary.
Taking up the story, Tony recounted, quote,
I started having nightmares of the doll crawling up my legs onto my chest, in an attempt to strangle me. I woke up from each dream sweating. Marguerite had a friend who was a medium, and she asked her to hold a seance to see if there could be any supernatural explanation for the doll's behavior. At the seance, we found out that the doll had become possessed by the spirit of a little girl who died when she was 7 years old. She used to play on the site our apartment house was built on. She said her name was Annabelle Higgins, said Marguerite, and all she wanted was to be loved. She asked to stay. The next day, Annalie called Father Richard Nolan, an Episcopal priest who teaches at Matatuck Community College in Waterbury. I told him about the doll, said Annalie, and he referred me to Ken and Jones. They both advised us to get in touch with a well-known researcher in the occult, Edward Warren.
The Demonologist by Ed and Lorraine Warren and Gerald Brittle, published in 1980 and republished again in 2012. The basic main facts of this version are: the nurses called their priest called an Episcopal priest, and that guy called the Warrens. The Warrens show up. The nurses tell Ed and Lorraine a medium told them that the spirit of a little girl named Annabelle Higgins was present in the apartment. She had played in the field that was once where their apartments now stood. The medium states the spirit had taken a liking to the nurses and the doll, so the nurses invite the spirit to inhabit the doll. Now that Ed and Lorraine are on the scene, they explain it's not the spirit of a little girl, but an inhuman spirit. They exorcise the home, not the doll, and it's done. The nurses request the Warrens take the doll with them. Some stuff allegedly happens to a priest. He allegedly wrecks a car, and then also a detective who touches her claims it's so bad he can never tell anyone, except Lorraine, if she swears never to share. Ed claims the man didn't have to share, that he knew that he touched the doll and it caused a violent spiritual reaction. And that's pretty much the gist of this chapter in The Demonologist. But I did want to point out something I thought was super important in this chapter of the book. In Chapter 3, Annabelle of the Demonologist, Donna asks the Warren, quote, Then the doll is possessed? Ed replies, quote, No, the doll is not possessed. Spirits don't possess things. Spirits possess people. Instead, the spirits simply moved the doll around and gave it the illusion of being alive. End quote. Big thanks to Kenny Biddle for pointing out this paragraph in the Warrens' book. My reading comprehension is so bad that I completely overlooked the validity of this point. So, thank you, Kenny. I repeat, An Ed Warren direct quote. "No, the doll is not possessed. Spirits don't possess things. Spirits possess people. Instead, the spirit simply moved the doll around and gave it the illusion of being alive." End quote. Straight from the horse's mouth, the doll is not possessed. Lorraine furthers this by confirming for them that the demonic and human spirit was in fact in the nurse's apartment, and they would perform an exorcism blessing on the apartment to rid them of the spirit. Next in the timeline, also in 1980, according first to Ed Warren and then later to Nesper members, a man taunts Annabelle in the museum and pays the ultimate price by fatally wrecking his motorcycle with his female companion surviving the crash. One Nesper member claimed this happened in the year 1980, specifically on Route 25 heading toward Route 8. His words, "I have debunked this by proving that Route 25 was not open yet in this area this man says this happened. I have proof of that here, and on the Instagram and Facebook as well as the TikTok page, and part 2 of this unexpected little Annabelle miniseries." 1990s. A Warren lecture. Ed tells the story of Annabelle, and it is remembered by an attendee of the lecture. The attendee remembers the Warrens telling the story of Annabelle being conjured up via a Ouija board. John Zaffis, Ed Warren's nephew, confirms the hearsay of a Ouija board being used in a recent interview on Paranormal Brew with the lovely host, Taryn. Great interview, and I'll link it in the description and in the show notes. 2000. Ed tells son-in-law, Tony Spiro, when they met with the nurses, they were told that the medium who declared there was a spirit of a little girl named Annabelle Higgins in the doll that had died in a car accident in front of the apartment building the nurses lived in. Remember before, it was a little girl who played in the field?
The woman held a seance and she said, "There's a spirit of a 6-year-old girl in that doll who was killed in an automobile accident just outside of your apartment house here." Well, there was a 6-year-old child by the name of Annabelle who was killed. But God does not allow the spirit of a child to go into a doll. This was a demon who was posing as that little child to create sympathy to these 2 young women, which it did.
Also, I did find record of an Annabelle Higgins in this area in the 1930s. However, she passed in her late 50s. I've also had this corroborated by the research of Autumn Sword, a writer for the Skeptical Inquirer and host of the podcast The Devil in the Details. 2012. The republication of The Demonologist is released, and the names of the characters are changed from Donna, Angie, and Lou to Deirdre, Laura, and Cal. No idea why this happened. I did reach out to the publishing company to see if they could tell me, but they never got back to me. 2024. I indirectly speak with Annabelle's original owner. She says, quote, "So much misinformation, but I guess that's showbiz." End quote. But also, she had one more thing to say after that little interaction that I have not yet shared with you guys. Here's what else the original owner of Annabelle had to say. Quote, "I agree. I am the owner of, quote, Annabelle. So we went through a lot. But after seeing that documentary and reading their chapter in their book about us and the events, I am now a little skeptical. Many things were changed, but I owe them a lot for getting that doll away from us." End quote. I truly believe the nurses were scared of something. What I don't believe is that Annabelle is, or ever was, demonically possessed. Inhabited, cursed, what have you. None of that is, or ever was, true. You know what I did consider, though? What if Lorraine and Ed show up, and Lorraine sees the Raggedy Ann doll, and convinces them the doll is the reason for their activity, and that they should take it with them? We know the Warrens were collecting, quote-unquote, artifacts, so I don't think this speculation is too far-fetched. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. These are the main examples I can find of the many retellings of this tale of an oh-so-haunted doll. It's interesting to me how this doll's story progressed and how the fear of her evolved. We know from the newspaper in October 1974, Annabelle was hanging out at Halloween parties hosted by the Warrens and taking selfies with the guests. If Annabelle was so scary and so dangerous, why was she being used as a Halloween prop? There's something else that might be interesting to note. A man claiming to have known Lorraine shared a conversation he had with her via his Facebook page around the time Annabelle's road tour began. Loads of people were, and still are, concerned about traveling with something said to be so evil and or demonically possessed and presenting it to the public. People were so concerned and believed so strongly that Annabelle is dangerous that many people believed she was responsible for a string of unfortunate events following her visit to New Orleans. People actually believed she was responsible for the fire of a very old, very well-known plantation, as well as several convicts that escaped from a nearby prison. And one of my Facebook followers, Nicole, told me that the 911 system went down in her area and everyone was blaming Annabelle. Shout out Nicole. The news was even asking if Annabelle was to blame. This was all absolutely ludicrous. The amount of people perpetuating these tales was just absurd. So anyways, back to the man who claimed to know Lorraine. Michael Salerno. He made a Facebook post to address all the fear and rumors spreading over Annabelle traveling. Here's what he had to say. Quote, "I'll never forget asking her about a photo I'd seen of her holding Annabelle outside the museum. I said, 'If Annabelle is so dangerous, why were you holding her?' She smiled and said, 'Michael, honey, that's not the real Annabelle in the picture. It was just a Raggedy Ann doll that we used for the newspaper that day. I would never hold Annabelle or take her out of that case.'" End quote. I find this insanely interesting. I shared this post in its entirety on the Facebook, and here on the screen if you'd like to pause and read it. After I shared it, and because of what I said about it being contradictory, the original poster was pretty upset with me. But for Lorraine to say this doll is so dangerous and then allegedly lie to your audience in the same breath, I'm sorry to the late Lorraine Warren, but that's a load of crap. However, if that's the case, if this Raggedy Ann doll was, quote, a decoy for the safety of the public, two things. Firstly, what was the point of lying to the public about the doll being the real Annabelle? Because that's how it is presented to everyone. They've never said, not once, that I can find or have ever heard that the Annabelle in the photos was a decoy. I have heard there have been different Annabelle dolls though, so there might be something to this. And secondly, does that discount any experience the reporter Jill Amadio had with the Raggedy Ann doll she was given to photograph for her article in the paper in 1975? What about the nurses posing with the doll? Did they pretend that the doll was real for the paper? For the public to see and believe? Maybe that's why they look so comfortable with it. Maybe that's why they're touching it. I find this extremely intriguing because I actually spoke with Jill again very recently. She let me interview her on what it was like working with and writing for the Warrens in the local paper in the 70s. I will have that interview as a whole up after I release this episode. But I wanted to clip in a little bit of it here for you guys in just a moment. But first, as many of you know, I have decided very firmly that I do not believe in Annabelle as a haunted doll. The fact that she has half a dozen different origin stories, parties with guests, and poses for selfies for Halloween and newspaper cameras has no concrete evidence of anything paranormal, let alone demonic, and is touring America like she's Taylor Swift to line Tony Spears' pockets. I just cannot believe this story as told to me by anyone. So then, I did the second interview with Jill, and something she said gave me pause. She elaborated a bit more on what it was like being given permission to take Annabelle with her to the news studio. Here's what she had to say.
I went there with the Warrens and listened to the story and decided to write about it. And I asked the roommates if I could take the doll with me back to my newspaper so it could be photographed. So that's what I did. But I put the doll in the back seat of my car on the seat. And I'm driving along, and suddenly I see the doll's face in my rearview mirror. It turns out she had moved. So I ignored it and drove as fast as I could back to my office, and we photographed the doll.
When I heard this, I instantly questioned my entire existence. Did she really just say the doll moved in her back seat? I wanted to believe her, because why would she lie about that? She has nothing to gain. No hand in this game whatsoever. I didn't really believe she was capable of telling me a lie either, but my gut was screaming at me, at the very least, not to trust this memory of hers. So I gently tried to press her to make sure she was remembering correctly and to make sure I heard her correctly. She confirmed. Then, after this moment, I read that Facebook status, stating Lorraine herself said they didn't let the real Annabelle go out in public. So, assuming that is true, that there was a decoy Annabelle used for parading around to dishonestly make money off of, then what did Jill see? Or is she having a false or distorted memory? This event did occur 50 years ago, so the possibility of remembering wrong is pretty good, and the possibility of it being a false memory due to the fear at the time, also very plausible. I did double check with Jill after telling her about the claim of a fake Annabelle being used for photos and travel. She thanked me for telling her, but stood by what she said, and still insisted Annabelle moved in her back seat. What do you guys think? I still firmly believe Annabelle's story is made up, especially the story as it's told today, that she has a demon inhabiting her. Please. But I wanted to hear what you guys think. Let me know below in the comments if you think Annabelle really did move in Jill's back seat, or if it was a false memory, and if you think Annabelle could actually be haunted. But before you do, please consider this little bit of psychology. When Jill Amadio drove with Annabelle in the car, her mind was already primed for fear. She had just interviewed Ed and Lorraine Warren, heard the stories of the doll attacking people, and accepted the possibility that it was cursed. This mental setup, called priming, meant her brain was on high alert, scanning for anything strange and ready to interpret it as dangerous. Survival mode and primed perception. Fear triggers the fight or flight response, flooding the body with adrenaline and cortisol. These chemicals sharpen focus on perceived threats, but impair logic and precise memory. In Jill's case, her amygdala, or fear center, was overactive, while her hippocampus, or memory recorder, was under stress. A simple car turn, brake, or bump could shift the doll. Stress and high adrenaline could make her misremember exactly where she placed it. Quick glances in the mirror, passing shadows, or reflections could all enhance the illusion of movement. Reconstructive memory. Memory isn't a video recording. It's a reconstruction. Each time you recall it, you build it from fragments. In the hours or days after, Jill likely replayed the moments repeatedly, told others what she thought she saw, and faced questions like, did it really move? Each retelling can add or reinforce details until a fleeting impression, example, I think it moved, solidifies into certainty. It moved. Suggestibility and belief. When an ambiguous event happens in a fear-charged state, beliefs can fill in the blanks. If Jill already believed the doll was capable of moving, her brain could unconsciously resolve uncertainty in favor of the supernatural explanation. The confidence illusion. Emotional memories feel more reliable, even if they're wrong. Jill's fear was real, and because the emotion was intense, her certainty about the event likely grew over time, whether or not the movement was genuine. In short, Jill's Annabelle experience likely combined fear-primed perception, stress-impaired memory, and later reconstruction. A small, ordinary movement, or even a shadow, could be magnified by expectation and locked in by emotion, creating a vivid, confident memory that may not match reality. So, did you know there's currently another explanation for why Annabelle might be haunted? According to the Warrens' grandson, Judy Warren Spears' estranged son, Chris McKennell, Annabelle is an egregore. What the hell is an egregore, you ask? According to lore, an egregore is, in esoteric and occult traditions, a concept describing a non-physical entity or a thought form that arises from the collective thoughts, emotions, and intentions of a group of people. It's often described as a, quote, group mind or, quote, collective consciousness that can influence the individuals within the group and even act independently. So, if Annabelle were actually an egregore, that would negate the whole story as it's told by the Warrens, and would mean they had no idea what they were actually doing. So, is Chris saying his grandparents were wrong? He seems to have all the answers about Annabelle in his very recent videos. So, side note, when I went to pull this video up again to reference, I realized I have been blocked. Not only has my Truth or Demons Instagram been blocked, but my model Instagram as well. I don't usually interact with paranormal people from my model page. I tend to keep them separate. So how did Chris know to block it? Did he go searching for my social media? That's a little unnerving and weird. But also, I did challenge and call him out in his comments from my Truth or Demons page. So, he clearly doesn't want me doing that again from any page. Also, something else I noticed when I pulled up his page. Yes, I'm still able to see your Instagram, Chris. But I noticed my comments are gone. Really, Chris? Why is it everyone who lies in the paranormal hides and deletes comments? Dumb question, Stevie. Anyways, so yeah, here's that video. And for shits and giggles, here's my comment as well, since they've been hidden from the public.
Annabelle is obviously one of the most famous cases that my grandparents ever worked on. And my grandmother hated that doll. She hated to even look at it. But it wasn't what people think it was. It's not a demonically infested doll. It isn't. I believe it's something called an egregore. The two nurses that owned that doll poured so much love into it that the thing started to actually manifest as a spirit. And it put its hands up on the table. And so they started having seances with this thing, trying to find out where it came from. And they used a psychic medium who was completely wrong, which is one of the reasons I don't trust psychic mediums without evidence. She came up with this backstory of a little girl named Annabelle who died in front of the house and was just looking for somebody to love her. Well, they poured all their love into it. They made it start manifesting as a little girl. It was playing hide and seek with them. It was leaving playful notes for them. And then they started to get creeped out. It became negative. And that's when the energy they were feeding it changed, and that's when Annabelle became something to be afraid of.
Chris said, don't challenge the doll. Many people actually say that. And tell me if I'm so sure she isn't haunted, then hug her or challenge her. But we all know Tony wouldn't let me near her. And challenge her? I mean, sure. Do your worst, Annabelle. But honestly, I'd really rather just give her a hug. #FreeAnnabelle. Let's talk about grifting with Annabelle, and how much money has the Annabelle tour made? Okay, let's talk about the money. As you all know, Annabelle is still touring the US. The tour is called Devils on the Run, and it's been making serious waves in the paranormal world, as you also know. But here's something that's been quietly growing in the background. This tour may have made over $500,000, and yes, it's still going. Let me break it down for you. The tour launched in May of 2025. It's already stopped in places like West Virginia, San Antonio, Gettysburg, Illinois, and Kentucky. Each stop is packed with fans eager to see the haunted doll up close, and the events are selling out. Ticket sales. In Gettysburg alone, over 1,260 tickets were sold in just 3 days. And that wasn't a one-time success. Multiple cities have had completely sold-out shows. Now, let's do the math. Estimated revenue. Conservative estimate. 5 major stops, 1,200 attendees each, $30 a ticket. That's $180,000 in ticket sales. And that's before we count merch. And remember, some stops had extra fees for saying Annabelle. Merch and extras. Most paranormal events like this sell VIP upgrades, meet and greets, and exclusive merch. That can easily add on $10 to $30 per person. Multiply that by thousands of attendees, and you're looking at tens of thousands of extra dollars per event. Bottom line. Realistically, this tour has probably earned between $500,000 and $600,000, with the potential to hit even higher as more stops are added. And this isn't some mega concert. This is an alleged haunted doll in a glass case traveling from city to city, backed by a team of so-called paranormal investigators and the legacy of Ed and Lorraine Warren. So whether you believe in demons or not, one thing is very true. Fear sells. And Annabelle? She's not just allegedly haunted. She's profitable. And maybe that's the real horror. Annabelle isn't moving. She isn't scratching, growling, or throwing anyone across the room. She's sitting in a glass and wood case, doing absolutely nothing. But somehow, she's raking in hundreds of thousands of dollars. For a man who also sits around doing nothing but threatening to punch people in the face.
If I ever see any of these people in person at bad enough, I'm going to punch them right in the fucking mouth. And I'm going to punch a lot of people in the fucking mouth.
This isn't about demons, it's about demand. She's not cursed, she's curated. Packaged, branded, paraded from city to city like a sideshow relic, raking in ticket sales, VIP passes, and merch revenue at every stop. When the Warrens passed on, their stories didn't die. They became assets. And what's scarier than a haunted doll? A haunted doll on tour, surrounded by curious onlookers and way too many believers, all paying for a chance to stare at a 50-year-old toy. This isn't supernatural. This is marketing. Until next time.
Thank you for joining me for Annabelle Part 3. I'll put up some other videos you guys can check out if you like, and also I have an extra quick little bonus for you. I actually had considered the pictures in the paper that go with the Annabelle story from the article written by Jill Amadio. She said she took the doll to the news studio to photograph, but she didn't say that they went with, but the photos in the newspaper have Ed in them, and then also the two nurses. So I asked her if she took those photos of the nurses and the doll and Ed and the doll, and she actually told me that Ed and Lorraine took a bunch of photos and provided them to the news studio and said it would be better if they used their photos, which I thought was super interesting. Anyways, just wanted to share that with you guys. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and have a look at these other videos.